Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to have a discussion on the principle of inclusion-exclusion, one of the most fundamental counting techniques in discrete mathematics. Imagine you are at a university event where students are surveyed about their favorite subjects. Some students love mathematics, others prefer physics, and many enjoy both. Now, if I simply ask you to count how many students like at least one of these subjects, you might instinctively add the number who like math to the number who like physics. But wait, this approach has a critical flaw that leads to overcounting. This is precisely where the principle of inclusion and exclusion comes to our rescue. The core insight is beautifully simple yet profound. When sets overlap, naive addition counts the overlapping elements multiple times. We must systematically correct for this overcounting. Let's start with the fundamental case of two sets A and B. The formula is A union B equal A plus B minus A intersection B. Why does this work? Think of it step by step. When we calculate A plus B, we are counting every element in A once and every element in B once. But here's the problem. Any element that belongs to both A and B gets counted twice. Once when we count A and once when we count B. To fix this overcounting, we subtract A intersection B exactly once. Now let's extend this to three sets. The formula becomes more intricate but follows the same logic. A union B union C is A plus B plus C minus A intersection B minus A intersection C and minus B intersection C and lastly adding on A intersection B intersection C. This might look complex at first, but let's understand the reasoning. We start by adding all individual set sizes, which overcounts intersections. Then we subtract all pairwise intersections to correct for double counting. But now we have overcorrected. We have subtracted the three-way intersection 3 times when we should have subtracted it only twice. So we add it back once. This alternating pattern of inclusion and exclusion is what gives the principle its name. And it extends to any number of sets with the same logical structure. Moving on to our next topic, let's explore one of the most elegantly simple yet surprisingly powerful principles in mathematics, the pigeonhole principle. The principle states, if you have n plus 1 or more objects and only n containers to put them in, then at least one container must contain more than one object. This might seem almost trivially obvious, and in a sense it is. But don't let its simplicity fool you. This principle is the key to solving many complex problems in computer science, number theory, and combinatorics. Let me give you a relatable example. Imagine you have 13 socks and 12 drawers. No matter how you distribute these socks, at least one drawer must contain 2 or more socks. Why? Because if each drawer contained at most one sock, you could accommodate at most 12 socks total. But you have 13 socks. So the pigeonhole principle guarantees that some drawer must contain multiple socks. But we can generalize this principle further. If you have n objects distributed among k containers, then at least one container must contain at least n by k objects, where these brackets represents the ceiling function, the smallest integer greater than or equal to the value inside. Let's see this in action. If 50 students are randomly assigned to 6 project teams, what can we guarantee about the team sizes? Using our generalized principle, 50 divided by 6 gives us 8.33, which equals to approximately 9. So at least one team must have 9 or more students. The power of pigeonhole principle lies not just in these direct applications, but in its use as a proof technique. It's often used to prove existence, to show that something must exist without actually constructing it. This makes it invaluable in theoretical computer science and discrete mathematics. Now let's delve into permutations and combinations, two fundamental counting techniques that answer different types of questions about selecting and arranging objects. The key distinction between permutations and combinations lies in one crucial question: does order matter? Let's start with permutations, where order absolutely matters. The formula for permutation is PNR equals n factorial divided by n minus r factorial. This counts the number of ways to arrange R objects selected from n total objects, where the order of arrangement is significant. Think about it this way. If you are selecting 3 students from a class of 10 to serve as president, vice president, and secretary, the order matters tremendously. John as president with Mary as vice president is completely different from Mary as president with John as vice president. Let's calculate P10(3). That is 10 factorial divided by 10 minus 3 factorial. That gives us 10 factorial divided by 7 factorial. And voila, we have 720 different ways to arrange these 3 students. Why does this formula work? When choosing the first position, you have 10 options. For the second, you have 9 remaining. For the third position, you have 8 remaining options. So the total is 10 into 9 into 8, that is 720. Now let's contrast this with combinations where order does not matter. The formula is CNR equals n factorial divided by R n minus R factorial. This counts the number of ways to select R objects from n total objects where order of selection is irrelevant. Using the same scenario but with different question. From 10 books on your shelf, how many ways you can choose 3 books to pack in your backpack for a trip? Here, it doesn't matter whether you pick book A first or book B first. What matters is which 3 books you end up with. The calculation goes on: C10 by T equals 10 factorial divided by 3 factorial multiplied by 7 factorial. And the output you get is 120 weights. Notice that the combination result is smaller than the permutation result. This makes sense because in combinations, we don't distinguish between different arrangements of the same selection. The relationship between permutation and combinations is PNR equals CNR multiplied by R factorial. This tells us that every combination can be arranged in R factorial different ways to give us the corresponding permutations. Before we dive into mathematical induction, we need to understand a fundamental property of natural numbers called the well-ordering principle. The well-ordering principle states that every non-empty set of natural numbers has a least element. This might seem obvious, but it's actually a profound axiom that underlies much of number theory and discrete mathematics. Think about it. Whether you have the set 5, 7, 23 or the set 100, 200, 300 and so on, there's always a smallest element. Even in infinite sets of natural numbers, as long as they are non-empty, there's always a minimum element. Why is this principle so important? It's the philosophical and logical foundation that makes mathematical induction possible. When we prove something by induction, we are essentially saying if our statement fails for some natural number, then by the well-ordering principle, there must be a smallest natural number for which it fails. Let's call this the minimal counterexample and show that this leads to a contradiction. Without the well-ordering principle, we couldn't guarantee that our inductive arguments have a solid starting point. It ensures that there's always a first natural number where any pattern begins, which is crucial for the base case in inductive proofs. Now we arrive at one of the most powerful and elegant proof techniques in all of mathematics: mathematical induction. This principle allows us to prove that a statement is true for all natural numbers starting from some initial value. Mathematical induction works like a domino effect. Imagine an infinite line of dominoes. If you can prove two things: first, that the first domino will fall, and second, that whenever any domino falls, the next one will also fall, then you can conclude that all dominoes will fall. The formal structure of mathematical induction has three components. The base case: prove that the statement Pk is true for the initial value k. Inductive hypothesis: assume that Pn is true for some arbitrary natural number n greater than equal to k. Lastly, the inductive step: using the inductive hypothesis, prove that Pn plus 1 must also be true. Let me demonstrate with a classic example, proving that 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus up to n equals nn plus 1 by 2 for all natural numbers n greater than equal to 1. So the base case is n equals 1. Left side is 1, right side is 1 plus 1 divided by 2. That becomes 2 divided by 2 equals 1. Since both sides are equal, the base case holds. Then we have inductive hypothesis. Assume that for some n greater than equal to 1, we have 1 plus 2 plus 3 up to n equals nn plus 1 by 2. Then we have the inductive step to prove that 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus up to n plus 1 equals n plus 1 multiplied by n plus 2 divided by 2. Starting with the left side, where we have 1 plus 2 plus 3 that goes up to n plus 1. And by an inductive hypothesis, we can replace the first n terms with n plus 1 by 2, and then we have plus n plus 1. On solving the entire equations, we get n plus 1 multiplied by n plus 2 divided by 2. This matches exactly what we want to prove. The beauty of mathematical induction is that it allows us to prove infinitely many cases with just these three finite steps. We have essentially proven this formula for n equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on forever. Finally, let's explore a variation of mathematical induction called complete induction, also known as strong induction. The key difference between regular induction and complete induction lies in the inductive hypothesis. In regular induction, we assume Pn is true and prove Pn plus 1. In complete induction, we assume that Pk, Pk plus 1, Pk plus 2, up to Pn are all true and then prove Pn plus 1. Why would we need this stronger assumption? Some mathematical relationships don't depend just on the immediately preceding case, but on multiple previous cases. Complete induction gives us access to all previous cases, not just the most recent one. Let me illustrate with the fundamental theorem. Every integer greater than equal to 2 can be written as the product of prime numbers. So the base case n equals 2 is itself prime. So it's trivially a product of primes. Just itself. Inductive hypothesis. Assume that all integers k can be written as product of primes. Then we have the inductive step. Consider n plus 1, either n plus 1 is prime or its composite. If n plus 1 is prime, then we are done. It's already a product of primes itself. If n plus 1 is composite, then it can be written as n plus 1 equals a multiplied by b. By our inductive hypothesis, both a and b can be written as products of primes. Therefore, n plus 1 equals a multiplied by b is also a product of primes. Notice how we needed to use the fact that the statement holds for multiple previous values, both a and b, not just for n. This is why complete induction was necessary here. Complete induction is particularly useful in computer science for analyzing recursive algorithms, in number theory for divisibility proofs, and in combinatorics for problems involving multiple dependencies. So today we have covered 6 fundamental principles that form the backbone of discrete mathematics and proof techniques. From the systematic counting approach of inclusion-exclusion through the deceptively simple yet powerful pigeonhole principle to the elegant proof techniques of mathematical induction, these tools will serve you throughout your mathematical journey. Remember, mathematics is not just about memorizing formulas, it's about understanding the underlying logic and reasoning. Practice these principles with various examples, and you will develop the mathematical maturity needed for more advanced topics in discrete mathematics, computer science, and beyond. Thank you everyone for your attention throughout the video, and I look forward to our next video where we will explore more fascinating topics in discrete mathematics. And if you found this helpful, hit a like, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to help us grow. I will see you in the next video. Till then, happy learning.